All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started now. For those who don't know me, my name is Matt Pavlov. I'm the director of the Kinderhook Library, and I just wanted to thank you all for coming out today. And I also wanted to thank Lisa for helping us arrange this presentation. For those who haven't met her, Lisa is the new director, is that the proper title, at the Historical Society right down the street from us. And she's the one that put us in touch with Ben Feldman, who's going to be doing our presentation today. So I just wanted to give Lisa a chance to talk about some of the upcoming programs at the Historical Society, because I think you have two, you said.
Yes. Yes, just quickly, again, yes, thank you all for coming. We're planning a series of lectures, one per month. We're partnering with the African American Archives of Columbia County, so we're doing a series of 5, hopefully the 2 right now we only have secured so far. The first one will be in February on the 26th, Sunday at 3 p.m. It's going to be held at the Town Hall. And the second one will be March 12th, also a Sunday at the Town Hall. So those are our first 2, and look for those. If you want more information, or if you're not on our email list, be sure to come to me and give me your email. They're going to be on topics about the enslaved in Columbia County.
Thank you. And I also wanted to just let you all know we have a great presentation coming up on March 11th. Maria Alperman, who's a local author, is going to be talking about the history of women's sculptors, and specifically the ones that she's seen and spoken to, and she's done a lot of research on the topic. So if you're interested in art, I highly recommend you come out for that. And without further ado, I'll let Ben introduce himself and we'll get started.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Lisa, first. Thank the Society and the library also for hosting this talk today. My name is Benjamin Feldman, and the title of the talk's there, as you know. And I'm an author, a historian. I had a business career. I'm 70 years old. And I think Matt asked me before, how did I come upon this subject? Well, I was born and raised in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And well, I see some smiles in the audience, so those of my generation or maybe a little younger know that Oak Ridge was built as a secret city starting in December 1942 and was the site, and still is the site, of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And this is where the uranium was refined for the first 2 atomic bombs. Oak Ridge didn't exist before December 1942. It was built very rapidly. And it was built in a site 20 miles from Knoxville, Tennessee, on a 2-lane paved country road that I traveled frequently as a child and as a teenager. It's now, Knoxville is now just a huge sprawl of interstates and I-75 and everything, and you don't use this road anymore to get to Knoxville. But I did many, many, many times. And Oak Ridge was known as the Clinton Engineering Works originally, to keep it quiet, and it was secret. It was an army base. And here is a map of Tennessee that was published probably well before Oak Ridge was built. And you see Knox County here. You see Knoxville, there's Knoxville is right here. And here is Clinton, Tennessee. Clinton still exists. It's a small town. It's literally physically adjacent to Oak Ridge, and thus the name, the Clinton Engineering Works. Clinton was built, it goes way, way back. It was a railroad town, a center of coal mining, transport, manufacturing, etc. Doesn't have too many claims to fame left anymore. So Oak Ridge is situated right here. South of Knoxville, a bit north of Knoxville, is a community, you can't really see this that well, but it's Powell, P-O-W-E-L-L, and that will figure very much in this talk that I'm going to give now. So needless to say, having gone to public school and high school in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and right next door to Knoxville, really, James Agee was and still is a local hero, Agee was born in Knoxville. James Rufus Agee was born November 27th, 1909, in Fort Sanders, which is a neighborhood in downtown Knoxville, adjacent to the University of Tennessee its main campus, which has at least 60,000 students today. It's probably a lot more. That's a count from a while ago. And Fort Sanders remains a neighborhood. It's old, rambling frame houses. They're occupied mostly by students now and people affiliated with the university and people affiliated with the Fort Sanders Medical Center that's right there. And the site of the house in which James Agee grew up until his father's untimely death is very much a local tourist attraction, if you will. I don't know that many people come to it, but it's a park. The house was demolished quite a few years ago, and there's something called James Agee Park, which is on what's now named James Agee Place or James Agee Street, which was 15th Street. In Fort Sanders. So you can go online and look at this, but the house hasn't been there for many, many decades. As a child in public school, as a teenager, of course, we all read A Death in the Family. This was, I don't know if it was required read, we all read it. Everybody read this book. And a copy of the paperback edition of the first edition of the book is sitting there. Matt was kind enough to retrieve from the library's collections a second edition of the book. And a professor named, I think, Matt Lofaro at UT decided at some point, I think 15, 16 years ago, that the edition with which we're all familiar of A Death in the Family, which was published posthumously. Agee died before it was completely completed. It was edited extensively by his editor, McDowell, and according to Professor Lofaro, it's not authentic. Lofaro went back and compared the typescripts, okay, and half of that fat white volume are notes of what this is not right and that's not right. I haven't read it. Maybe it's worth reading. I'm not a text scholar. I have recently read Death in the Family over. For the first time in, it's probably 50 years at least, probably 55 years. But I didn't really read it. I didn't read it with the book in front of me. Agee himself said publicly, and I don't know if he wrote this ever, but he was known to say that his longer works, his books, A Death in the Family, Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, etc., were meant to be read out loud and to be listened to out loud. I am not a fan of audiobooks, okay? I've never thought that the narrators did what I thought was a, appropriate job or one that was to my taste. But I was facing a limited time frame here, and first I got the audiobook for Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, which is so dense, it's impenetrable. I bought a copy at the Book Barn on Rodman Road. I opened it up 3 times. I was already into this project intensely. I could not read this book. And then I didn't feel so bad when I found out what Mr. Agee said about his own writing. I got the audiobook on Amazon. The narrator is fabulous. His name's Lloyd James. He's from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I think he has a natural Eastern Shore Southern accent, but the accents he uses when he reads Let Us Now Praise Famous Men and also Death in the Family are the local accents. The East Tennessee, not the Appalachian Southern twang like this, like people used to talk where I grew up, but he uses a softer, more educated Knoxville, quote, urban, unquote, accent, a somewhat more educated accent. He does women and he does men with perfect equanimity. And so I got the Amazon Audible. It's only 35 hours for Let Us Now Praise Him. What else do you do if you're driving up and down between the city and the Taconic Parkway? Death in the Family is only 15 hours, and I will swear to you that many is the time, I've listened to both of them within the last 3 months, many is the time that I had to pull off the road because I was weeping so profusely. This man is a fabulous narrator, and he brings Agee's humanity, his humility to life. And so I commend these to you. Matt asked me, well, how'd you find out about this house? Okay. Well, many of you know the Book Barn, Maureen's bookstore at Rodman Road. I've been going there since 1983 when I and my ex-wife bought a house in West Taconic, which we still share. And we found out about the Book Barn. In those days, Rodman Road was completely unpaved. Okay, and the section that goes from the little bridge where the road turns was paved, I don't know, it can't be that long ago, from West End Road, I think, the first section. But then it's gravel from there, way, until it ends, maybe 12 miles long. So I was interested in Agee. I saw books. Maureen actually has a little section devoted to James Agee, although there are not many books in it left, because I bought most of them, okay? But I picked up a copy of Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, and then I picked up a copy of Lawrence Bergreen, that's the tan-looking volume there, Lawrence Bergreen's biography of Agee. There have been a couple biographies written of Agee, of James Agee. This one is the only one I've read from cover to cover. It is dispositive. It has errors in it. Everybody, my books have errors in them, okay? They're not a big deal as far as I'm concerned. He's not a literary scholar, he's a biographer. But nonetheless, the book is dispositive. He's done so much research. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference that he misidentifies the exact location of James Agee's grave, which I'll get into. Like, what's the big deal there? But I commend this to you. It's through that biography that I found out that Agee and his third wife, his widow, Mia Fritsch, purchased a dilapidated farmhouse on Rodman Road in the late spring of 1948. And all of a sudden I'm like, what? Up here? I've been up here for 40 years and I didn't know that? And so I got a little crazy about the whole subject. And next time I was at the Book Barn, I asked, because the book doesn't identify the exact location. And Rodman Road's a long road. I think it's a good 12 miles long. I went on the internet and I found some photos of the house. But the terrain around Rodman Road is quite varied, and like you're going to go looking for a dilapidated farmhouse on Rodman Road, it might not be so easy to find. So I just stopped by and asked Maureen one afternoon. She says, of course. Well, you can walk there from here. I mean, it's just go up the road, bear left at the little bridge, and you'll see it sitting up on the hilltop there. I already knew what it looked like from these internet postings. And she said there's two quite new white plastic gate posts there, and a new, you'd call it a cattle fence there. And I said, okay. I drove up there, and it took like 2 minutes, and I got lucky. There's the house. It's in terrible condition. Let me scroll down here some. It's unfortunately very, very dilapidated. It looks like this. I took this picture, I don't know, 4 months ago, something like that. There's another shot of it like that. And it's close to falling down. I mean, it's in danger of collapse at this point. On that cattle fence, there were two no trespassing signs hanging. No, one, two, I don't know, the same. One of those plastic, typical ones. And lo and behold, the names of the owners of the house, the current owners, and their two separate phone numbers are right there. So I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to get into the house? What story am I going to tell these people to justify me getting into this house? I mean, am I going to tell them I want to buy it or something? No, the truth is always the best policy. And I called up Dick Beebe, and he and his brother Nick owned the house. Their late father owned a hunting camp next door to the property on the sort of north side of the property. And this gentleman, Dick Beebe, he was so nice to me. I explained who I am, where I'm coming from, why I want to go into the house. And he said, sure, when do you want to go? I said, how about Wednesday? It was Monday already. He said, sure, I'll meet you there at noon. And we spent several hours going through this house. And the roof's been leaking. I think he's got the roof leaks fixed now. The foundation is starting to crumble, unfortunately. This house is not long for this world unless, Joan Davidson takes an interest in it or something. It needs a healthy six-figure sum of money to stabilize it. Maybe you should just, I don't know. I'm not an architect. I don't know what should be done. But that's how I found out about the house. Agee himself, as I said, born November 27th, 1909. At the age of, at the age of 7, his father, unfortunately, driving back from a visit to family north of Powell, actually, had an auto accident on what still is 25W. It's 4-lane federal highway for many years, but back then, you're talking 1916, I guess, 1915, 1916, the road was a gravel road. And his father had a very modest vehicle and apparently hit a rock. It was nighttime, and the car careened down the embankment of what's called Beaver Creek. Beaver Creek is about as much as a creek as Stockport Creek is a creek. It's a small river, and it feeds into the Tennessee River in Knoxville. It's quite long. Careened down the embankment. He hit his chin, apparently on the windshield. When the corpse was examined, there was just a little blue bruise there, nothing else. He died instantaneously of a concussion. Okay, and so the phone call came, and if you read A Death in the Family, this is all laid out in very, very sad but complete detail, and he died. James, I think, was 7 at the time. He had a younger sister, Emma, and their mother was a widow, Laura Whitman Tyler, and her husband was not wealthy. I don't recall what his profession was, but it was something quite modest. And so the kids were then educated in several boarding schools away from Knoxville, but not that far. The most prominent of these schools was located near his mother's summer cottage, 2 miles from Sewanee, Tennessee. Sewanee is, I don't know, it's probably not even an hour from Knoxville. There was may still be, a monastic order, Episcopalian of the Holy Cross, ran a school called St. Andrew's School, and for mountain boys. And this is where James was educated for quite a few years. And he made friends with the history teacher, Father Fly, F-L-Y-E. And one of the most famous and relevant small books that you can read, you can get it on a Kindle even, is a transcription of James's letters to Father Fly from a fairly young age until his death. Father Fly, although he left the boarding school, a long, long time before, was Agee's steadfast spiritual counselor and friend until Agee died. So I commend these letters to you. They're dated. The location from where Agee wrote each of these letters is in the book, is printed. So there are a number of letters that were written in Hillsdale, and Hillsdale means the house. They were written in this house. Okay, and it also provides corroboration, the letters do, of what Agee was working on, in what years. Bergreen's done the research in other letters, and et cetera, but the letters to Father Fly are really dispositive. So, let's see. 1924, the fall of 1924, Agee is sent by his mother for the school year to Knoxville High School. Okay, so he was back in public school. And then that summer, after he graduated at 16, he went with Father Fly to Europe. They went on a European trip together. And when they returned, Agee transferred to Phillips Exeter in New Hampshire. where he had a reasonably successful career as a student, and then matriculated at Harvard College in let's say at the end of 28, start 29. He was in Harvard College's class of 1932, not a particularly distinguished student, but he made some very interesting friends, among them Robert Fitzgerald, the translator and poet, among them Lincoln Kirstein, of New York City cultural fame later, and quite a few others. He was the editor-in-chief of the Harvard Advocate. He did deliver the class ode at his commencement, but I don't think he graduated summa cum laude or even cum laude. He was, deeply, deeply religious by this time. He switched from, I don't know if his family was Episcopalian or not. He certainly went to an Episcopalian boarding school as a teenager, but he became a Catholic and remained you couldn't call him a lapsed Catholic, but there's very little in his letters or in the biography that indicates, Bergreen's biography, that indicates that Agee actually went to church that often. But the references in his I'm going to call them memoirs. I don't call Death in the Family a novel. It's not. It's a memoir. The references to spirituality, to Christianity, to Christian scriptures are prolific in many of his writings, even in his film criticism. So he graduates from Harvard in 1932, moves to New York City, and is hired by Henry Luce as a reporter for Time magazine. He was not assigned to political articles or things like that, but you could just go through the indices and read his articles in Time. Also, Fortune. Luce had him write for Fortune, and Fortune's format in those days, and I don't know what it is now, but in those days, in the 30s, Fortune wrote feature articles about socioeconomic topics. Obviously a somewhat conservative pair of magazines. It's Luce, but Agee fit in. In the summer of 1936, he was assigned by Luce with Walker Evans, the very famous photographer, to go down to Alabama and to live for 8 weeks with Caucasian cotton tenant farmers, sharecroppers, in their own dwellings, and to write it all up. And they did so. And the product, those articles were never published in Fortune, because my suspicion is that Luce found them a bit too human, perhaps too racially egalitarian, albeit that Agee was sent and Evans lived with Caucasian families. There were black sharecroppers in the immediate area, and their encounters with these men and women on the farm roads down there with the African American farmers are told in detail with such humanity and with such humility. You won't believe it when you read, if and when you read them. I freely admit Agee uses the N-word sometimes in his descriptions of what's going on. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. He certainly doesn't use the word African American. He would use Negro or colored in some places, but he uses the N-word, okay? I think I can forgive him for this. It's historically relevant, but not really says anything about him as a human being. These articles were never published, and Agee acquired the rights to them back from Henry Luce, and they were collected. And in 1941, Let Us Now Praise Famous Men was published by a commercial publisher. It sold all of 600 copies and was remaindered, and it remained obscure until about 1960. And then it was republished and has become one of the most acclaimed works of mid-20th century. I don't know, how would you characterize this book? It's history and it's sympathy, and I commend it. It's dense. It is dense. Put it on your Audible. The photographs are, as you might expect from Walker Evans. You've seen the WPA stuff and everything like that. And there's even been a book written and published years ago about the children of the Gudgers and the other, I think there are 3 or 4 families that Agee and Evans stayed with. So it follows up from a sort of anthropological point of view, what happened to the children and the grandchildren of these miserably poor cotton tenant farmers. Haven't read it yet. It wasn't necessary getting ready for this talk. So in 1937, Agee left Fortune, and then in 1939, he changed responsibilities at Time and became the film critic of Time magazine. And a year later, was hired by The Nation, where he remained the film critic also for the next 6 years. Apparently that was okay with Luce and okay with whoever controlled The Nation at the time. His film criticism, I didn't even know he was a film critic. I mean, and that black volume there, which is a Library of America edition, which I think is at the library here also, is a collection not only of his film criticism, but several other shorter works. You know, we're all fans of the late Pauline Kael, and some of us of Gene Shalit, if I may be so bold. But Agee's film criticism has almost nothing to do with anything I've ever read of Pauline Kael's, and certainly not of Gene Shalit's. Are any of you familiar with the philosopher Walter Benjamin, German philosopher? Passed away. He killed himself in 1942 before the Gestapo captured him at the Spanish border. So Walter Benjamin was a Marxist, and among his works is an essay which I commend to you, which is freely available on the internet. It's called the Work of Art in the Age of Technology. I think the Work of Art in the Age of Technology. It's close to that title. This is not a long essay. It's not as dense as Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, but you do have to read every sentence 4 or 5 times. And it's about, it goes back to Greco-Roman times. And it's on an intellectual niveau that Agee's film criticism approaches. You know, it's about image, it's about function, it's from a capitalist point of view. And in 2 or 3 pages, Agee manages to criticize, and I don't mean in a negative way, writes criticism of films that were mostly produced during World War II. And most of these films you've never heard of. They were propaganda films produced by the Russians, by the British, by the American government. You might not call them propaganda, but they were propaganda. And they're easy to read, and they're very thoughtful, and thank goodness I started looking them up. You better set aside some time for reading these pieces of film criticism, because almost every single one of these films is available free on YouTube, the whole film. Okay, so you can get an idea of what Agee's talking about in 2 or 3 minutes from watching this, and they're just at a spectacular level of intellectuality. 1940. Okay, so Agee was hired by Life magazine in the summer of 1948. Yeah, is that right? 1948. He had become really a freelance writer, and he had also written, I can't call it the script, but the title, they're not titles, it's a page of text for most of the scenes in Helen Levitt's The Quiet One, which is a silent film that was released that year. It's about a psychologically non-normative young African-American child. You can also get this. It's 15 minutes long. You can also find this for free on YouTube, and it'll give you an idea of how Agee got into script writing. As a film critic, Agee lionized John Huston, okay? And in the summer of 1950, he was invited by Life magazine to write an article that he finished that September at the Hillsdale House about Houston and his directorial talents. It was published in the September 18th, 1950 issue. I'm sure you can find it easily. And with that, he became acquainted personally as he was doing this with Houston. And Houston then invited him to come out to Los Angeles. He had to the West Coast, actually. He had a project he wanted to discuss with Agee, and Agee was so excited about the possibility of working with John Huston. He'd been approaching him forever. And then the article happened, and fine, and he was invited to come out and write the script for The African Queen. And this is what he did. There were some changes made to it, but he worked with Huston very, very, very closely. So when Agee was in Los Angeles during that assignment, he made friends with Charlie Chaplin and his wife. And there's a good bit of criticism of, let me call it commentary, in this black volume of Chaplin's films. And nobody can put it more succinctly, more beautifully, just how talented Chaplin was. Chaplin and Huston were gods to James Agee. And I don't know if they returned the favor or not, but the Chaplins and James and his wife, Mia Fritsch, became socially quite close and spent a lot of time together out there. In 1951 in Santa Barbara, Agee was down there. I don't know what he was doing down there, but he suffered a heart attack, a very serious one. He was, as you know, an alcoholic. If I said this before, I'll just say it again. He made Dylan Thomas look like an abstemious choir boy. I mean, it's funny, but Agee would drink all night and write and write and write. He was capable. How many? I mean, Hemingway. I mean, how many? Thomas Wolfe. How many authors are alcoholics who can just drink and write? To me, it's inconceivable. One glass of wine and I'm out. He also was a chain smoker. Just always smoking. He would stay up 2-3 days at a time, not sleeping, working on his manuscripts and drinking. He would go out drinking with Nick and Dick Beebe's father, who owned the hunting camp, and not go out drinking. There's nowhere to go back in those days around Hillsdale. Well, a couple little taverns, but they would go hunting also, because that area is still full of deer and probably some bear now also. So he had this really bad heart attack, and Mia and the children, as John and his two sisters. Was John born yet in 51? Yeah. No, in 54. So thank you. The two daughters went out with Mia, and they stayed out there while John convalesced. But while James convalesced. James was a very stubborn and recalcitrant individual, and the doctors told him, no smoking, no drinking, he just knock it off. Well, he couldn't keep away. He couldn't keep away from those things. And in the summer of 1952, they returned, Mia and James and their two children, returned to New York, where they began splitting their time between the Hillsdale house and an apartment at 17 King Street in the Greenwich Village. Agee continued to concentrate on film assignments. Let me get this back up here. Is it going to do it? Yes. On film assignments, he was hired by Charles Lawton to write a script for Night of the Hunter, and he did that partly in L.A. and partly in New York City. When he was out in L.A., he started, unfortunately, an extramarital affair also, which lasted for quite some time, devastated his wife, obviously, and he returned to New York City in the fall of 1952, right before the birth of John. Actually, I have the dates wrong, but he returned in 54, right before John's birth. It says it in Berggreen's novel. But when he returned to New York, he spent most of his time in Connecticut at a friend's home, drinking. John was born. Agee returned to New York from Connecticut when he heard that Mee was actually in labor. And things were a mess. His affair with a woman named Tamara ended. He went into an emotional tailspin from which he barely recovered, both mentally and physically. And he began to concentrate on a death in the family almost exclusively. Unfortunately, the angina was still there. There were several attacks in 1954. On May 16th, 1955, James Agee was in a taxi cab on his way to a doctor's appointment, and he suffered a fatal heart attack in the taxi on May 16th. So the funeral service was held, I believe, the next day at St. Luke's in the village. I think it's Hudson and Christopher Streets. And Father Fly flew to New York City from the Midwest to conduct the funeral service. And then a cortege, if you want to call it that, a procession of vehicles took the coffin, some friends, and they all went up to Hillsdale, to the farm. James had told many people that he wanted to be buried on his country property, and that's where he is. There's no gravestone. Let me just show you. Let me just show you what it looks like. I'll go back to some of these other photos. Here's his grave. Oops. That's the stone. In front of the stone, if you look carefully, you can see the imprint of his coffin. You can't see from the photo. It has to be the right light and the right conditions. But I spent some time there with Dick Beebe. This stone was placed there by John Agee. It came from the woods. I think he drilled these holes probably and stuck some rebar in there and took the stone from the woods and put it where the coffin is now. People come to the property, they leave flowers sometimes. I'll get into that in just a minute. But that's where he's buried, and like nobody knows this. I mean, it's on Find a Grave or something. Many of us, some people in this room who are very close with the family, and the Beebes themselves are very eager to have some more formal memorial to James Agee on the site, and I know Dick Beebe's all in favor of this, but it always comes down to a matter of money, you know. And so we'll see what happens. One of the reasons I wanted to give this talk is to spread some public knowledge of this fact. I mean, if Dylan Thomas's gravesite was not known, and somebody all of a sudden discovers this and it's publicly known, maybe something good would come from that. Let me go back to Death in the Family for a minute now. I don't want to run out of time. So here's Beaver Creek. Okay, this is a concrete bridge. It's actually 25W. It's 4 lanes plus a median strip. It replaces what was probably a previous old concrete bridge, which itself replaced the iron and or steel Bell's Bridge, which is mentioned in A Death in the Family and which is the site of the auto accident. Go down here. What is remaining are the abutments to the steel bridge, or it's iron or steel, I don't know. The abutments are still there at the creek. And my friend John Fairstein, who lives in Knoxville, went down there a few weeks ago and took pictures of these abutments. And here's the other one, and another shot of it. And this is where the accident happened. Here's another one. This location, Powell, was known as Menifee Station. In the late 18th century, I never heard this term. I never saw this sign, but apparently it's here. You know, in the 1790s, Tennessee became a state, I think, in 1790. And there was still an enormous number of Native Americans living in Tennessee, particularly in East Tennessee. So the possibility of racial violence, however you want to denominate it, was very present in this part of the country. So that's why the sign says what it says. Is this? Okay. Here, the red dot is where the car went down the hill. This is where the bridge, the iron steel bridge was. Down here is what you saw, the concrete bridge with the creek flowing under it. And here, The green lines my friend John added, Bell's Bridge. This is where, and there are pictures of this bridge on the internet. That's not much to look at. It's like the bridge at Stuyvesant Falls, okay, that one lane. It's a 125-year-old bridge now there. Looks something like that. Why was it called Bell's Bridge? I don't know. There was a Mr. Bell. His name was memorialized by some highway engineer somewhat recently, because here's Bill Bell Way, you know, but the rest of it, don't even bother Googling it. You're not going to find anything. And let's see what else I have here. Stone, we did the house. This is the porch to the house. You get into the house this way. Who knows who slept on this? Here's one of the fireplaces. Looks to me to be late 18th, maybe early 19th century, in terrible, Lisa Weilbacher knows better, terrible condition, terrible condition. Oops, I'm going up. I want to be going down. I just got a couple more slides. Here's the inside of the house, ground floor. Partitions have been ripped down. One of the two the propane stoves, it's still there. A bed frame, maybe James slept there some nights when he was alone in the house. Who knows? Upstairs, terribly water damaged ceilings, but it's not leaking anymore. The BBs put down some plastic sheeting. They did some repairs, but how long is it going to last? I don't know. Here's the same fireplace. These are fire bricks. They appear to be sitting on a wooden platform that may be an ingress to the basement. Why it would be in front of a fireplace, I don't know. Maybe it's just a big hole in the floor. Oh, you want to?
Held the wood stove.
Excuse me?
It held the wood
Oh, they
stove.
held the wood stove. Okay, thank you, thank you. Do you want to identify yourself, or I won't? It's somebody who's knowledgeable. Here's a bathtub. Apparently, I mean, from what I've read, there was no running water in the house when James and Mia bought the house. When this bathtub got up there, I don't know. This is not the kind you heat water up to take a bath in. It's an iron clawfoot tub. And here is the property across the road. This is this enormous wetlands. It's just untouched. It's several hundred acres. And here's Rodman Road heading south towards the book barn. So, I only want to say one other thing, which is that if you want to go visit the house, go visit. Go get the phone numbers off the gate. Call up Dick Beebe, and I think he'll be more than happy to let you in. Please do not do what others have done. There's a bunch of photos of the property on Flickr that were taken in 2012. They are obviously taken by an individual who trespassed on the property, because he couldn't get these views otherwise. And and it turns out they were taken by a man who's probably was an honorable soul. He's deceased for quite a few years now. He operated something called the Dead Poets Society. So he would go around taking pictures of grave sites. Well, that's wonderful, but you know, breaking the law on property rights, I mean, it's just not the right way to do it. And but you can see him there still. And there are the other photos on Pinterest of the house I had taken down, because I'm just not I'm not like a, you know, crazy about this kind of thing, but I just don't think it's right. Let's see. That is pretty much it for now. There's wine.'re going to do discussion questions. Should I take questions now, Lisa? Or yeah, Matt? Yes? Go ahead.
I was just going to say that there's somebody here. No embarrassing.
James Agee was my uncle.
Your uncle?
Spent most of my summers at that house.
Oh, that's wonderful. And may I ask what your name is, sir?
Peter Fritsch,
Ah, I know who you are. I know who you are.
Mia's nephew.
Okay.
That's a lot of time.
Yeah, so was there running water there when you were there?
it was by the 60s.
By the 60s. Okay.
Was that bathtub on the second floor?
Blah, blah, blah.
Or if there was a bathtub
No, it's on the first floor.
it was on the-
There's a commode. Yeah, there's a commode on the ground floor. There's no plumbing upstairs as far as I know. Yeah.
We also brought, I wish we could have sent them to you, maybe you couldn't ask, but some pictures.
Oh,
Two
yeah.
pictures that we were, my name is Leslie Doyle.
Hmm.
Right?
Peter French.
And so I knew John and Mia and the two sisters.
Okay, great.
As well. We found, going through all this Anyway, at the very bottom, couldn't do it. At the very bottom, two pictures from Hillsdale, one of James Agee and his car in the background.
Oh,
And this is where Nick's family spent their honeymoon. And you can see in 1949,
wow.
and he would come down, you should
Well,
tell us.
he would read passages from Death in the Family.
Really?
As he was writing them.
As he was writing them, yeah.
They
Yeah. If you can write like that, you got to be able to tell a story even better.
So we brought the pictures of his phone.
Okay, great.
Everybody's interested to
I'm
see
so
that.
interested. Also, I just want to show you one other thing. When I was upstairs with Dick Beebe, I spotted this on a table, and he said, "You want that?" And I said, "You better believe." And he said, "Well, take it." And it is it seems to have been part of a bound set of literary journals. The front page says Partisan Review, January, February of 1940. But then inside it says Kenyon Review, spring of 40. So I don't know what's what, but the crowd among whom Agee ran, so to speak, in Greenwich Village, okay, in the 30s, in the 40s, until his death, was made up of people whose names are here. You know, Lionel Trilling, Victor Surge, who was a refugee from Europe whose life Varian Fry saved. G.L.K. Morris, Delmore Schwartz, Catherine Ann Porter, Sidney Hook, Philip Roth, Clement Greenberg, the art critic, James T. Farrell, Stubbs Lonergan. I mean, these were the gratin, as you say in French, of the literary world. Yes.
So, how did he come to choose to buy a house in Hillsdale? Did he have
Some
friends?
friend of his, it's in Bergreen's book. I don't remember if the friend's name is mentioned there or whatever, but a friend drove up there with Agee and said, this is what you ought to look into. What's interesting is this is dated 1940, so I don't know who brought it into the house. It was brought into the house. Agee didn't buy the house till 1948, but I'll bet you $5 DNA. I'll bet you there's some DNA. I ain't letting go of this easy. And maybe it does. It could have been a friend who left it there. Who knows? Yes.
And the St. Vincent Millay was a friend of his.
Yes, I would think so. She lives at 75 Bedford Street in a 9.5-foot wide house, right? It's still there. And he ran among a pretty interesting crowd of people. I mean, he was a very engaging conversationalist, somewhat truculent sometimes, or how do you pronounce that word? Truculent, but nonetheless a genius. His he published one volume of poetry. It's spectacular. His diction, his vocabulary, his spirituality, his humility, okay, and his Christianity with a small c, in a spiritual sense, were really staggering. And I'm a convert. Yes.
You said something about his father was a man of modest means,
I think so.
and then you said that after he died, his mother had a summer place, and he went to a boarding school.
Right, a cottage. She had
Cottage.
yeah.
So how does that work in Tennessee in 19?
I really don't know. Knoxville, Tennessee was founded in the 18th century. It was an industrial town, a commercial town. Did his father and mother have any money? They must have had some. I really don't know where they got the cottage from. I don't know. Could have inherited it. Could have built it with their bare hands. They certainly were not wealthy. I think if one looked at the Surrogate's Court files in Knox County and read his father's will, you could get some sense of the size of the estate and the administration of it, et cetera, et cetera. I haven't gone there yet, but they certainly were not wealthy. Yes.
When you went to visit the home, did you go to the grave?
Of course, it's right behind the house. Literally, I would say it's 20 yards behind the house.
And I read somewhere, maybe this was a little blurb in the paper, that he wanted a bird on his stone.
Yeah, it's not there now. Now, the photos on Flickr, show this sort of Egyptian-styled bird and whatever on the stone. And the stone looks different, but light, weather, etc., there's no sign of this bird anymore. People have come onto the property and laid flowers there over the years. It's not happening anymore, but well, you have to get in touch with the owner of the property. James died in '55. John died 5 years ago, I believe. 17. Yeah, so 5.5 years ago. And John's widow, Bobby Agee, took control of the house. And then 5 years later, she sold it to Nick and Dick Beebe. And that's what's happened to it. So you need their permission, and they'll give it to you. As far as I know, I mean, just call them up. Yeah.
I do have to tell one quick story.
Please.
So when Bobby bought the house, she wanted, didn't really want to keep it. A lot of complications about what was on the property and whose was it, and a lot of infighting among other siblings. And anyway, my sister was the estate attorney, and she called up once and said, you know, I'm here at the property of Robin Road. Yeah, Bobby called up my sister and said, I'm here at the, didn't you say that James Agee was buried on this property? And she said, yeah, right in the middle there. And she said, oh, well, there's a guy with a backhoe here who's about to go right in that spot. So I guess I better stop him.
This is after John's passing?
Yeah.
A guy with a backhoe?
They were doing some kind of work, I guess, probably purchase or something, or I don't know.
Finally proved to be too much for her to deal with.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of walk-around photos in the house.
Oh, there was all kinds of stuff in the house, I've been told. It's not there anymore. We don't need to go into that. Don't want to get into things.
No, we got mine was one.
Yeah.
So Nick and John.
Yeah, my cousin John was kind of rough.
Well, what a nice group. Anything else? Thank you so much for coming. I expected 5 people here today. Thank you. If you want to take a business card, get in touch with me. You can call me, write me, whatever. The project I do, which are on my website, that's on that card, I frequently hear from people years later after I publish a project on the internet, and they have the most invaluable information and stories. And I've even, I'm working on a sequel to my second book now that it came over the transom via the internet, via an email, via a comment on a blog. And all of a sudden, I'm in France 2 summers in a row doing research. So thank you.